Today, as part of our beginning watercolor series, we're going to paint a pair of pears. The line drawing is included with this lesson. There will be a button or something for you to click on to get the line drawing and the reference photo. You can probably see or at least a piece of my reference photo here. It's all set up to be 5 by 7. I'm using 140-pound Arches paper and a couple of Stephen Quiller brushes. They're called Richardson Professional Stephen Quiller, an 8 and a 4. The first thing I do, I've put this design on the paper using a pencil. And pencil lines are sometimes troublesome in watercolor. So even though I carefully put this pencil line on, I'm now going to erase it back. And probably makes it a little harder for you to see, but it will turn out good in the long run because then you don't have a pencil line to overcome. The Vanish eraser from Jerry's is a really good one to use. So I'm going to be doing some direct painting, which means just going into the water and picking up some color. This is Aeolian Yellow. And I'm just going to reach in. I want it pale up here. We're going to work from light to darker. So there'll be more than one layer on this, and I'm just kind of putting in a base coat of color. And pick up a little Indian yellow to warm it up a bit. I see it as pretty warm down here, and that's more of what I would call a standard pear color. I'm just filling in, using the pigment that's already on the paper and picking it up. You can see there are a couple of highlights in my reference photo, and I want to put those in even here in the very beginning. So taking a cloth and wiping down my brush and then just lifting color. Try that again. Okay, so here's one highlight, here's another highlight. These aren't exactly where they belong, but it gives us a good start. While it's still wet, I'm going to go in with a bit more of the Indian yellow, and I'm going to get, woo, got that really nice and dark. I'm going to get down in here where it's a bit darker, and I want it more heavily pigmented. Then I'm going to just pull the color out, get it a bit lighter. The tricky thing with watercolor is always controlling the amount of moisture. If the moisture of what's happening on your brush differs from what's happening on your paper, if the paint starts to dry, you can easily get blossoms, which are pretty undesirable. So we're going to just do this much on the yellow pear. And I'm going to go on to the green pear so that this has a chance to dry. For the green pear, I'm using a little bit of sap green. And again, I want to stay pretty light because I want to put this in as the first base coat. So I'm picking up a little bit of lemon yellow and sap green, and I'm going to go in and just put the first bit on this pear. Again, you see where that highlight is right there. And I want to lift that back out. And this pear has some yellow in it as well as that green. That's kind of a harsh yellow. Just kind of get a little base color here. We can certainly adjust it as we go along. It's darker and cooler over here at the side. And right here in the beginning, I'm going to add just a bit of ultramarine blue and cool this green down. Okay, now I'm going to go off camera and dry this so that we can do the next layer. So our paper's now dry. To test for dryness, you can put the back of your hand down against both the paper and the place where you have paint. It should feel the same. To expedite this process, I used a hair dryer to get my paint dry. You always have to dry when you're going to do the next layer of paint. So I'm now starting with a dry yellow pear and a dry green pear. And you can see the difference between my reference photo and the painting. This is much darker. This has some green reflected over from the green pear. There are several adjustments now that I'm going to make. So I'm going to pick up my lemon yellow. Mostly lemon yellow. And now I'm going to also pick up just a bit of Indian yellow so that I can reach back and forth from these two little bitty puddles to get just the color variations that I want. So I'm going to start up here at the top again. And now I'm paying a little more attention to my reference. I want to keep kind of a wet line so that my paper and paints aren't drying out on me, and I can keep moving color around. I'm going to pick up a little shadow color. I'm going to try some blue here and maybe a smidge of burnt sienna, which will make kind of a grayish color. I want to just add this grayish color into the side of the pear. It's always tricky with watercolor, especially when you're just beginning, to know what it's going to look like when it's dry. I recently heard an artist say, if it looks right now, it's wrong. It dries at least 10% lighter. So again, I'm going into that gray mixture, and I see it up here at the edge too. A pear is kind of a column or like a cone shape and a round shape. So now I want to kind of indicate that. It's a round ball on the bottom and a cone up on top. I'm going to pick up a bit more yellow and right here, it looks pretty much a nice soft yellow. And then it kind of moves into just a little bit of green. So I'm picking up just a tiny bit of green here where I'm seeing the other pair reflecting onto this one. And here's my highlight. Now over for my green one. Don't feel like that sap green is quite the right color. So I'm picking up a bit of cobalt, especially for the side of the pear and over here in the shadow. So I'm just going down the side where it butts up against the other pear. And again, this pear shape is a cylinder on top and then a round ball on the bottom. Sometimes if you kind of think of it that way, it helps you to paint it more accurately. And here's my highlight. Almost looks like the shape of a heart. And I think just a little more dark up here at the top. And pull some of that pigment out into the pear. Now I can't do much more with either pear right now while it's drying. So I'm going to go on to the doily. And certainly in your painting, if you don't want to have a doily, don't make one. I'm just going to use some burnt sienna and some brown. Make kind of a mixture here. Probably should have a big puddle, but I'll let them be varied. And the way you paint a doily is you paint the table underneath. So all I'm doing in all these little shapes is just laying down a brown color, because that's where we're seeing the table through the doily. Off camera, I dried it again so that I can do a third layer on this. I'm going to start with the yellow pear. And now I'm adding a little cad yellow. I like how warm it is, and I'm making a very light wash of it. You can see here on my palette. I'm just going to go over most of the area, even into the shadow part, with my cad yellow. Kind of unifies the painting and adds that nice warm tone of yellow. The fun thing about watercolor, being able to just reach over, grab some color, and just drop it in a bit. So I'm adding color that probably isn't really there in the original, but I think it adds some more excitement to the pear. And I don't want this to be too dull, so we're just adding a little extra energy to it. On the green pear, I'll pick up some blue, little green, and I want this shadow area to be much more pronounced. As I was doing the little nitpicky details, I remembered a little trick to make the doily have a bit more depth, and that is to make a little dark line on one side of the holes. This also goes for, if you look at the reference photo up in under here, that could also be a bit darker, and that kind of lifts that doily off of the table. Now, as long as I'm working in the brown, I'm going to mix up a fairly big puddle of the brown, and I've added a brush. This is a Richardson Steve Quiller size 3/4. Sometimes if you're painting a large area with too little a brush, you just get way too many streaks, and it takes you way too much time to do a simple wash. See my little blossom there where I didn't keep the liquid the same? Okay, so now I'm just coming in with a little more dark of my table. So I think our table's done. We're going to finish up with the pears now, and I think we'll be in pretty good shape. We're going to do a light wash of a nice light green over our green pear. Just kind of pulling the whole thing together. And again, I've exaggerated the color a bit. And you can paint red pears, green pears, yellow pears. You can use this basic idea to really play around with and improve your skills. I'm going to take a nice light yellow. I kind of mix all my yellows together. And then I'm going to put a lot of water with it. And I'm going to go over all of it to kind of pull it together too. Now I'm going to work on my stem. There are all those little freckles on pears. And if you look really closely, they are brown as well. And I'm going to take just my bigger brush and just indicate a few of them. We don't have to get real carried away doing them all. And my final adjustment, I think, is shadow. Again, I'm going to pick up some blue and some burnt sienna. See if I can get a good shadow color. I want this area just to be a little bit darker. It is the pear that's behind, so I want to indicate that with a deeper shadow. There's probably a couple of places on the yellow pear that could use a bit of shadowing. Okay, just lift out the excess there. And I think we're gonna call it 2 pears and a doily. Thanks for watching.